This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by SpyCloud. Stolen data circulating on the criminal underground is fuel for data breaches, account takeover, ransomware attacks, and online fraud. Your biggest security risk might be a breach or malware infection outside of your control that leaks the data of your users. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, powering solutions that proactively protect over 2 billion employees and consumers worldwide. Learn how to make recaptured data your best defense at spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. A nation-state threat actor targets industrial systems, a quick look at the GRU's earlier attempt against Ukraine's power grid, the difficulty of recovering from a credible threat to industrial systems, Lazarus Group resumes Operation Dream Job, OldGremlin speaks Russian and it holds Russian companies for ransom, Carole Theriault looks at research on lie detection, Josh Ray from Accenture drops some SBOMs, and another look at the privateers in the Conti gang. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, April 14th, 2022. Late yesterday, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency announced that with its partners in the Department of Energy, the National Security Agency, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, CISA had issued a joint cybersecurity advisory. It warns that certain advanced persistent threat actors have exhibited the capability to gain full system access to multiple industrial control system, supervisory control, and data acquisition devices using custom-made tools. The advisory recommends familiar best practices for protecting ICS and SCADA systems, and explains the threat actors' tools as follows. The APT actors have developed custom-made tools for targeting ICS and SCADA devices. The tools enable them to scan for, compromise, and control affected devices once they have established initial access to the operational technology network. Additionally, the actors can compromise Windows-based engineering workstations, which may be present in information technology or OT environments, using an exploit that compromises an ASRock motherboard driver with known vulnerabilities. By compromising and maintaining full system access to ICS SCADA devices, APT actors could elevate privileges, move laterally within an OT environment, and disrupt critical devices or functions. The immediate actions CISA recommends are to implement multi-factor authentication, change system passwords, especially any default passwords, and use a properly installed continuous OT monitoring solution to log and alert on malicious indicators and behaviors. The Washington Post reports expert consensus that the energy sector, especially liquefied natural gas facilities, are probably the tool's most likely targets. Dragos calls the activity group CHERNOVITE the malware PIPEDREAM, while CISA's advisory called out specific products and merely suggested that others might be vulnerable. Dragos is explicit in its assessment that other systems are at risk. They said, the tooling may be used to target and attack controllers from hundreds of additional vendors. PIPEDREAM can target a variety of PLCs in multiple verticals due to its versatility. That versatility has been observed elsewhere. Wired quotes sources at Dragos to the effect that PIPEDREAM is like a Swiss Army knife with a huge number of pieces to it. It's equally capable of collection, compromise, disruption, and destruction of industrial systems. Two of the points Dragos makes illustrate the versatility. They say, CHERNOVITE can manipulate the speed and torque of Omron servo motors used in many industrial applications and whose manipulation could cause disruption or destruction of industrial processes, leading to potential loss-of-life scenarios. PIPEDREAM's Windows-related components facilitate host reconnaissance, command and control, lateral tool transfer, and the deployment of unsigned rootkits. The warnings about this threat to control systems are forward-looking, as the tools don't appear to have been used yet. Researchers at Mandiant have a different nomenclature. They call the toolkit InController, which emphasizes its ability to seize control of industrial processes. Their report describes 3 scenarios in which InController might be used. First, disruption of controllers to shut down industrial processes. Second, reprogramming controllers for the purpose of sabotage. And third, perhaps most alarmingly, shutting down safety systems to cause physical destruction. Like others, Mandiant believes the tools were prepared by a nation-state for its own use. That nation-state is, they think, probably Russia. Their evidence is circumstantial, their reasoning suggestive but compelling. The tools required resources and expertise to develop and don't have an obvious payoff, and there are similarities in style to earlier Russian efforts. And of course, Russia is presently engaged in a large-scale hybrid war. Nozomi Networks has commented on Sandworm's attempt to disable portions of Ukraine's power grid. The company's advice is familiar but worth attending to, recommending, as it does, implementation of sound practices and good cyber hygiene. Chris Grove, Nozomi's director of cybersecurity strategy, sees continuity between this attack and earlier, more successful takedowns of portions of the Ukrainian grid. He says, "The nature of this attack is one that everyone in the international critical infrastructure community should note, as it's one of a handful of attacks that has directly hit OT systems." He strongly recommends keeping an eye out for more Russian activity against power grids. An apparently and probably unrelated cyber attack against an industrial concern shows the difficulty such an organization can have returning to normal operations. The Nordex Group, a major wind turbine manufacturer that sustained a cyber incident on March 31st, continues its recovery some 2 weeks later. Only Nordex's internal systems are believed to have been affected. North Korea's Lazarus Group has resurfaced with an industrial espionage campaign directed against the chemical sector. Symantec researchers this morning outlined their findings, which conclude that Pyongyang is running a continued version of Operation Dream Job. First observed in August 2020, Operation Dream Job, as its name suggests, is a social engineering campaign that uses bogus job offers as the fishbait to lure the unwary quarry to bite on a malicious attachment that installs an information-stealing payload on the victim's devices. The operation's goal is believed to be theft of intellectual property for the benefit of the DPRK's chemical industry. Group IB reports that an unusual ransomware gang, OldGremlin, has resumed attacks against Russian targets. OldGremlin is an outlier in several ways. For one thing, it's careful and selective, watching the news closely as it shapes its fishbait. The fishbait proffered in this latest round of attacks details the coming suspension of Visa and MasterCard payment processing in Russia. The payload, located in a Dropbox, was the tiny fluff backdoor. OldGremlin's episodic activity may indicate that its members are part-timers working a side hustle. But the most unusual thing about OldGremlin is that it's a Russophone gang targeting Russian organizations. Most Russian ransomware gangs operate effectively as privateers and scrupulously avoid hitting Russian enterprises. Its most recent campaign, run last month, impersonated a senior accountant at a large Russian financial institution. And finally, while attention has shifted to Russian intelligence and security services cyber operations during Mr. Putin's hybrid war, the privateers, like Conti, are still with us. CNBC has joined those who've sifted through the internal chatter taken from the gang and dumped online. Conti's operations look a lot like those of a legitimate business. The messages show that Conti operates much like a regular company, with salaried workers, bonuses, performance reviews, and even employees of the month. Employee of the month is a particularly nice and caring touch, and note to self, why don't we have those around here? There's one big difference between the gang and a legitimate business. A lot of Conti's associates are unaware that they're working for a criminal enterprise. Lots of them, CNBC says, think they're working for an advertising company. We'd love to see the rate card they were given. And now, a word from our sponsor, Axonius. Securing assets, whether managed, unmanaged, ephemeral, or in the cloud, is a tricky task. Why? Because you can't secure what you don't know exists. But the days of not knowing are over. Enter Axonius. The Axonius cybersecurity asset management platform correlates asset data from existing solutions to provide an always up-to-date inventory, uncover gaps, and automate action. Axonius gives IT and security teams the confidence to control complexity by mitigating threats, navigating risk, decreasing incidents, and informing business-level strategy, all while eliminating manual, repetitive tasks. Visit axonius.com/cyberwire to learn more and try it for free. That's axonius.com/cyberwire. And we thank Axonius for sponsoring our show. Anyone with a security clearance or anyone who's watched old police procedurals are familiar with the notion of the polygraph machine, the old lie detector. Well, whether or not those are actually good at detecting lies is certainly questionable and up for debate, but the technology of lie detection has advanced. Our own Carole Theriault has this report on the latest.
Today, I want to talk about lie detectors, something that I rarely think about, but I guess that's probably true for most of us, unless, of course, we're faced with having to pass one. So a little history, because it's actually quite interesting. The polygraph, known as the lie detector test, is a medical device for recording a patient's vital signs, things like pulse or blood pressure or temperature or breathing rate. It seems the first polygraph machine was invented in 1921, so 100 years ago in Berkeley, California. Apparently, at the time, Berkeley had a very famous police chief called August Vollmer, and he was in charge of police reform, and he wanted to use the science to make the cops more law-abiding themselves. You see, until that point, if you were giving a suspect a third degree, it often meant beating them up. But lie detectors have had a very complicated history, and with good reason. Even as near as 2003, Gary Ridgway admitted that he was the Green River Killer, having murdered 49 women in the Seattle area. Ridgway had passed a lie detector test in 1987, while another man, who turned out to be innocent, failed. And the American Psychological Association stated that most psychologists agree that there is little evidence that polygraph tests can accurately detect lies. So, controversial. But none of this has dampened our desire to have a tool that helps us know whether someone's telling the truth or not. I mean, if we could find it, amazing. And the question is technology to the rescue? Professor Hanine and Professor Dino Levy have led a team at Israel's Tel Aviv University that have developed a new method of lie detection. They say they have identified two types of liars. Now get this. There are those that involuntarily move their eyebrows when they tell a fib, and there are those that cannot control a very slight lip movement where their lips meet their cheeks. Presumably, this has to be virtually invisible to the human eye. Otherwise, why would we need electrodes strapped to the user's face in order to detect these micro movements? Spokesperson says, when you try to conceal a lie, one of the things you try to avoid of any sort is a body reaction. But it's very, very hard for you to conceal a lie with this technology. And they say their software and algorithm can now detect 73% of lies, and they intend to improve that as they develop the system. Well, thank heavens. I mean, a lie detector that works 73% of the time, to me, is near useless. It means if it's used in a setting for someone to be employed or someone who's going to go to jail, You don't want something that's 73% accurate. That is just way, way too high a false positive rate. But I suspect we're going to be working on this for a while. After all, the first documented example comes from 1000 BC in China, where a suspect would have to fill his or her mouth with dry rice. If it stayed dry, they were lying. At least we're not doing that anymore. This was Carole Theriault for the CyberWire.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Invicti. Your organization is building and updating business-critical web applications faster than ever, and with so much pressure to move fast, you may find yourself making trade-offs between innovation and security. Now you can build fast without sacrificing security, thanks to Invicti. Invicti is the application security platform that helps your dev, sec, and ops teams work together to secure every website, web app, and API, even if you have thousands. With unparalleled accuracy and automation, Invicti scales like no other AppSec solution. And with more than 50 integrations, Invicti slides into your workflows more smoothly than any other platform. Now you can innovate as fast as you want without compromising on security. Discover why many of the world's largest organizations innovate securely with Invicti. Visit i.invicti.com/cyberwire. And we thank Invicti for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Josh Ray. He's Managing Director and Global Cyber Defense Lead at Accenture Security. Josh, it's always great to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
You know, seeing a lot of chatter about SBOM, which is the software bill of materials, and some of the mandates that are coming down the pike when it comes to that sort of thing. I wanted to check in with you. Your take on this, a good idea, something that its time has come?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, we put labels and ingredients on things that we eat. They're on the sides of our medicines. And just the simple fact that, we don't know everything that's in the software that we're linking up. I mean, I equate it to, Bob, the IT guy, is, getting ready to install the recent update, and his buddy Bill's like, hey, what's in this update? And he's like, I don't know. Like, that just should never happen, right?
Right.
Just hook it up to the life support system so we can go to lunch. I mean, that's just not like something that we should necessarily tolerate going forward. And I think the most recent executive order from a policy standpoint, and then obviously, seeing this play out with Log4j, only reinforces the necessity, because this is far overdue and something that our clients are very interested in as well.
What about folks who say that this is an added burden on folks, a regulatory burden, and may even provide a bit of a roadmap for bad guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the other side of the coin. But, that's also like saying security through obscurity too, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, being transparent and allowing defenders the opportunity to understand what is in their code and what they're deploying on their enterprises and how they're making smart purchase decisions from vendors only makes sense, right? This, natural move towards transparency will hopefully give both the government and other customers, more of a chance to proactively mitigate vulnerabilities before they're exploited.
All right. Well, Josh Ray, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks to all of our sponsors for making this CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, PlexTrack. PlexTrack, the proactive cybersecurity management platform, boosting teams' efficiency and effectiveness. Learn more at plextrack.com/thecyberwire. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. Our amazing CyberWire team is Liz Irvin, Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Eliana White, Guru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carole Theriault, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. And now, a word from our sponsor, TraceRoute. The digital world is fascinating with pivotal events, people, and societal changes that led to how the internet was designed. And there's a great new podcast that covers this journey, the TraceRoute Podcast, a 7-part series about the inner workings of our digital world. TraceRoute is an inside look into the people and events that shape the way it's built, like how the launch of Sputnik led to the modern internet. TraceRoute dives into the physical infrastructure that makes up the internet and where it could go, with interviews and stories from some of the leading technologists, entrepreneurs, and innovators of the past 40 years who are in the trenches, trying to solve complex hardware and software problems that no one had ever faced before. Listen and subscribe to the TraceRoute podcast on your favorite podcast platform, or go to origins.dev and learn more. That's the TraceRoute podcast. And we thank TraceRoute for sponsoring our show.